got it. You're welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, our service today, honoring the memory of Barbara Cohen, will be officiated by Cantor David Shukier. Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, please make sure that your cell phones, other electronic devices are off or silenced. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Cantor David Shukier from Temple Adat Elohim, and I am humbled to be here with you as we acknowledge the transition in the life of Barbara Cohen, and as we offer each other our love and support as you deal with the sting of her passing. Now, before we officially begin, I think there's a couple things that we have to acknowledge. We are gathering during unprecedented times, and the fact is there are so many things working against us being here today, and yet, with a pandemic that is raging all around us, and with winds that are really inhibiting our experience together, you are all here. And I think that that is important because it shows that your love for her and her love for you and your love for each other is stronger than this pandemic and is stronger than these winds that are going to be with us as we acknowledge the blessing of her life. Now, in ancient times, when we would learn of the death of a loved one, we would literally tear at our flesh out of the pain of that loss. As Judaism became more civilized, instead, we would tear a piece of clothing, which symbolizes the tear that you feel in your heart when you have to say goodbye to someone that you love. I'm going to tell you a story about a teacher in Israel that came into a class that he was teaching, and he showed the class the sweater that he was wearing, and he said, "This is the buttonhole that I tore when I learned that my brother had died." And he showed the class where that tear was. But he also showed the class how he had sewn up that buttonhole. Now, it was never quite the same as it was before he tore it, but sewing it back up again made it a functional piece of clothing. And I think that there is, I have one, thank you. I think that there is a great teaching for us in this moment. Your hearts are all torn wide open as you deal with this loss. But just as that sweater was mended, your hearts will heal as well. Now, it's never going to be the same as it was when she was physically living, but healing will come. And so today we are going to participate in the ritual of tearing the Kriya ribbon, which is that symbol of the tear that you feel in your heart. I encourage you, for those who are wearing it, I encourage you to keep these ribbons. And a year from now, perhaps when we are gathering, hopefully maskless and windless, to dedicate a headstone, I'm going to want you to take those ribbons and literally sew them back up. It's not a sign that your grieving is over, because it's never over, but you will be in a different place a year from now than you are now. So I'm going to ask, if you are wearing one of those ribbons, if you can stand. Actually, you stay seated. It's fine. Stay seated here. And I'm going to ask you, before every Jewish act, there is a blessing. And I'm going to ask you to repeat these words after me. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Dayan ha'emet. And that means we praise you, God, ruler of the world, who judges in truth. And the reason we say that is because we deal with the pain of loss in a very honest way. So I'm going to ask if you're able to tear that up a little bit. And can go ahead and be seated. You are to be praised, eternal our God, ruler of the world, for having created us in your image, for providing food and sustenance for us, and for causing us to die in accordance with the law of the world, for sowing the seed for eternal life within us. Baruch atah Adonai, Dayan ha'emet. You are to be praised, eternal God, the judge of truth. God is sure like an immovable rock. All of God's work is honest, and all God's ways are ways of justice. A God of faithfulness and one who does not do injustice. God is righteous and straightforward. God is sure as an immovable rock. All God's work is honest. Who can say to God, what is it that you do? God governs what is above and what is below, overseeing both the valleys of death and the heights of life. God is as sure, immovable rock, honest in all the divine work. Who can say to God, what will you do? You are righteous, eternal one, in your dealings with both death and life. The underlying spirit of every life is in your trust. You would not erase our earthly remembrance. May the mercy of your eyes surround us as a womb surrounds the unborn. For this reveals a world with the great potential for mercy and for forgiveness. Is a life of 1,000 years of more than that of a single year. To judge life in such a way makes it as if there had been no life at all. So praised are you, judge of truth, who ordains death and summons us to life. If you'll turn with me for a moment in the blue books, we're going to be on pages 6 and 7. First, I'll chant the Hebrew. If you don't have a book, we've got someone, Victor will hand them out. I'll chant the Hebrew first, and then we'll read together. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai Eloheinu echsar, בנודה שירביצני, וממנוחות ינחלני. נפשי ישובב ינחני ומגלת צדק למען שמו. גם כי אלך בגיא צלם מוות, לא ירא כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי. תשענת ושמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה. אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. The middle of page 7, let's read together. Adonai, you are my shepherd, I shall not want. You make me lie down in green pastures. You lead me beside the still waters. You restore my soul. You lead me in straight paths for your name's sake. Yea, though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Eternal forever. The book of Proverbs teaches us that the spirit of a person should be likened to a lamp from God, that not even the darkness that we call death should be allowed to extinguish God's light that has been kindled in the sanctuary of every living being. Therefore, Eternal One, we give you thanks in this difficult and challenging hour for that which has no death in the life of Barbara Cohen and which is now revealed in all of its beauty. For her love that united those here in life and which death cannot sever, for her companionship shared along life's path, which continues now with the precious ability that we call memory, for the gifts of her heart and her mind, which brought joy and happiness. For all these things and more, we give our thanks. The contemplation of death should bestow upon us the blessing of perspective and the gift of peace, enabling us to realize the abiding values of human existence. In the presence of the mystery of the grave, we are challenged to recognize the futility of many of our most cherished aspirations and the vanity of many of our most ardently sought goals. The quest for power and for wealth as a quest for baubles and tinsel, like children's toys, insubstantial and fragile. The more spiritually mature we become, the more profoundly we can understand that it is ultimately the simple glories and beauties of human life, the values of friendship, the value of courage, mutual love and trust, which alone have eternal significance. Two ships were once seen near land. One of them was leaving the harbor, and the other was coming into it. And everyone was cheering the outgoing ship, giving it a hearty send-off. But the incoming ship was scarcely noted. A wise person standing nearby challenged the people's reaction. "Rejoice not," she said, "over the ship that is setting out to sea, for you know not what destiny awaits it, what storms it may encounter, what dangers lurk before it. Rejoice rather over the ship that has reached port safely and brought back all of its passengers in peace." It is the way of our world that when a human being is born, all rejoice, and when one dies, all sorrow. And maybe it should be the other way around. No one can tell what troubles await the developing child on its journey through life. But when a person has lived well and dies in peace, all should rejoice, for they have reached their journey successfully and are departing from this world with the imperishable crown of a good name. Today, we celebrate, and we use that word carefully. We celebrate the journey that Barbara walked during her life, and we recognize the many blessings that her life continues to give to each of you as you continue to walk on your own journey, blessings that will never be taken away or altered. We are going to hear from some people that are most closely connected with her. Now, I want to make sure that we understand that there is no way that in these next few minutes that we're going to be able to encapsulate all that her life represents. And so we won't even try. Instead, we will begin this new process where you interact with her through stories and through your memories and through the ethical lessons that her living has given to you. And so now I'm going to invite Jeff to come forward and share some words with us.
Thank you, David. David said it's appropriate to start by saying a few words that come to mind when thinking about mom. Encouraging teaching, loving, caring, supportive, strength and patience. Well, those are my few words. Early on, likely around age 5 or 6, Mom tried to encourage me to be the strong and silent type. But that was the message I got earlier in the day when she screamed, "I don't want to hear another word out of you." That was a momentous day for me. It's the day I kind of learned to ride a two-wheel bicycle. She was kneeling, gardening along the sidewalk, didn't see me coming around the corner, barely in control. Within 30 feet of the corner, the bike and I slammed into her. Her response tumbled on the ground. "Why the hell didn't you say something?" Was immediately met with my reply of, "You said you didn't want to hear a peep out of me today." Early on, discipline, listening, and obedience were not my strong suits. I remember Mom took me to a doctor. I was taken to lots of doctors. There were eye doctors, hearing doctors, brain doctors. The brain doctor glued electrodes to my head and had me draw pictures. Removing the things always hurt, but then we would always go for peppermint ice cream. The hearing doctor sat me down one day for a hearing test, then had me follow various instructions. Do this, do that, walk on this line starting with your left foot, walk backwards, walk sideways. His conclusion after a very long appointment was that I was mother deaf. Some early lessons were learned or taught the hard way. At about age 6, I wanted the balsa wood gliders that were on the back of the cereal box more than anything in the world. All I needed was another few cereal box tops. One day, just outside the grocery store, I showed Mom that I had the box tops. Talk about bad timing. Steps away was a policeman sitting in his car. Mom walked me over, told him to arrest me for stealing. The officer walked me back into the store, and we had a conversation with the store manager about what I had done. Mom did her best to instill patience. There were hours of shopping at Bullock's. It was amazing how much time she could spend looking at shoes and purses. Thankfully, the department was directly across from the toy department. But that wasn't the part I really waited for. The important part was lunch in the store dining room with the models showing off their new clothes. And this one time, it wasn't enough for Mom to see the clothes on the models. Mom took me to the women's dressing changing room and had me try on outfits for Janice. These lessons were all prior to 3rd or 4th grade, where Mom taught inner strength and fashion sense when we moved to San Marino. Imagine walking into class for the first day of school or at a new school, not just any new school. San Marino schools were right out of a Norman Rockwell print. The boys were wearing button-down shirts and straight-leg slacks or cords, and the girls wore pastel dresses. Just imagine what I learned in a split second, standing in the doorway, dressed in wide-striped brown and white bell-bottom pants, a checkered shirt, and a psychedelic paisley silk kerchief around my neck. Mom was really smart. She helped a lot in math and spelling. Fortunately, my elementary school years were before new math. School was always tough for me. No subjects were easy. And Mom was always there for extra incentive. Only an A minus? Why not an A? She had the toughest time teaching me fractions. I remember hours sitting at the breakfast room table. It seemed like day and night. So now I certainly understand the phrase, 4 out of 3 people don't get fractions. Mom's guidance never slowed down. We talked about literature, economics, research projects. Even during college, she showed clear disdain for many of my dates. Later, around age 40, called her one afternoon to pick me up in Pasadena after a very bad bicycle crash. She pulled up in her blue Chrysler, rolled down the passenger side window, tossed me a bunch of white rags and said, "God damn it, don't bleed in my car." In the early 80s, Jo Beth entered the picture. Mom loved her. From the moment they met, I was lucky to have found someone with Mom's special qualities. Being nurturing, being very strong, being organized, very opinionated, and a voracious reader. Toward the end of the year that I started my own office, I was sitting on the library sofa talking to Mom about how well things were going and how the practice was really taking off, but I'd run into a huge problem. My main assistant had just told me she was pregnant. I was concerned about how we were going to handle the new patient flow without her in the office. Mom questioned, "Is it your baby?" I said no. She leaned across her desk and responded, "So what's the problem?" As Karen Haley started growing up, Mom enjoyed watching the girls mature and talking us through the various milestones. As a lifelong theater and music lover, Mom was always at the girls' performances and as close to front row center as she could be. With 2 adolescent daughters, Mom's cautionary advice to us was, choose your battles very carefully. Mom, we learned so much from you about so many things. You and Dad supported and guided us to many achievements. You were always there to lovingly help us through the tough times and the failures. In our hearts and minds, we carry your zest for life, for establishing deep, lifelong friendships. We cherish the way you have taught us to gently guide and enthusiastically support children's goals and ambitions. We love you.
Thank you. And now we'll invite Janice to come forward.
As Cantor David said, we are gathering because Mom lived, not because she died. Mom was a believer in gatherings. It's where she thrived, especially for simchas. We traveled all over the country to attend family simchas. I remember the good old days when Mom dressed up in girdle and gloves to travel by plane. Thank God those days are behind us, but Mom never wanted to miss a party or a reason to celebrate. Even after she was afraid to fly anymore, she flew or drove to be with family for their simchas and special events. My earliest memory of a party was my brother Ronnie's bris. He's 6 years younger than I am, and his bris, as I remember, was on or near my birthday, and the house on Chapel in Alhambra was full of happy people. That happened often, me sharing my June birthday with others. It just meant more presence and attention from me, so I was more than okay with that. In fact, I'm not sure I ever had a party just for me. For Mom, the more the merrier, so she'd pile events together to celebrate in June. Birthdays, Father's Days, graduations, etc. In 2006, Mom hosted a grand backyard party celebrating 5 cousins who graduated the same summer. Dara's PhD, Jessica's master's, Zachary's bachelor, Justin's 8A, and Lawrence's high school diploma. Mom's parties were always full of delicious food, of course, ice cream, of course, music, beautiful details, decorations, fun, and laughter. But Mom didn't always make good decisions. There was this one Hanukkah, for example, when she decided it was a good idea to give me my first bra as a Hanukkah gift, with 3 brothers looking on. Well, as I remember it, Ronnie tried it on himself, stuffing it with something or other.
Oranges.
Then Gary and Jeffrey tested its versatility as a yarmulke with chin straps, and then as a slingshot. Sometimes she made very big mistakes. You'll have to wait for Ronnie to come up here to tell you the story of Ochenta Huevos, if you don't already know it. And Mom loved gossip. Not the movie star sultry stuff. I don't think she cared about that at all. She wanted to know what her family and friends were up to. She loved and appreciated the calls and visits from everyone who reciprocated her love and friendship. You were also wonderful, a source of conversation and entertainment, especially these last few years after she lost interest in reading and other former passions. Mom and Dad volunteered their backyard and house for community and charity events, most especially for Temple Beth Torah. There was always plenty of food, and everyone was welcome. Once someone came as a guest, they were taken in as part of the family. Mom loved my friends. She supported me on my adventures and encouraged me to take flight and explore the world. I knew she loved me and was proud of my accomplishments because she told me so. And that's the greatest gift a mother can give her daughter. I looked up to her skills, her confidence, her competence and gusto. She spoke her mind, loved deeply. She was a true and loyal friend and was a force to be reckoned with. She was strong and smart, irreverent and determined. Did I mention she was a force to be reckoned with? She knew what she wanted and she wasn't afraid to go after it. It was Mom's inspiration that led me into a little entrepreneurial sideline hustle that I called Hostess Helpers. Our motto was "You party, we work." Essentially, it was the job I trained for at Mom's side since I was a kid. One day I was at their house. I returned a call to a client and Mom listened on the other line. She was quite impressed that people actually paid good money for me to run their parties for them. And since I learned from the best, you know, those parties were pretty good too. I remember being the little girl looking up at her as she was dressing for those glamorous dates and events with Dad, complete with the girdles, gowns, gloves, hairdos, jewelry, the pink lipstick, and too much opium perfume. I know many of us will fondly remember getting one of her bright pink lipstick kisses on our cheeks. I hope that memory makes you laugh because Mom loved laughter. She had a loud, contagious, not very ladylike laugh, and she didn't care. She cared about people. She liked to direct them, so it's no surprise she became a therapist in midlife. She shared stories of giving her clients advice and direction, and when I questioned that by asking if it wasn't really her job to help people come to their own decisions, she said, "Why? I already know what they should do." I know for the most part, she did provide excellent insights, and I've been told she helped many people through difficult struggles. Again, she inspired me to pursue the same second career, and I often draw inspiration from her life lessons when working with my clients. Mom with Dad was magnificent in her generosity and ability to have fun. She was outgoing, curious, really smart, and interested in others. I know she touched many lives in unique and special ways, and she leaves lasting impressions and positive influences on many. Most special to me was her love of being the strong matriarch of our household. She and Dad formed a wonderful partnership of love, respect, and mutual admiration. I wanted to be just like her in so many ways. I love when I find myself saying something she would have said or wondering, what would Mom do? Her guiding principle was family first. As you know, her family extended way beyond the six of us, and she especially loved the wives her sons brought into the family. Not only because that meant more parties and grandchildren, but because of the friendships and love she developed with Jo Beth and Amy and Heather. While Ken and Mom had the shortest relationship, they hit it off famously. And speaking of grandchildren, they were a constant source of gossip and love. She loved knowing what they were all up to. Mom and Dad were my dependable backup while Lawrence was growing up, so he had the privilege of spending lots of time with them when Mom was in her prime. When he was little, Mom and Dad loved taking him on adventures like to the Arboretum with bags of popcorn to feed the ducks, to Catalina with his friends, and more. They helped schlep him to Hebrew school, to sports activities, and had him to themselves for sleepovers. They spoiled him. She was so proud of him at his bar mitzvah and other milestones. Theirs was a really beautiful relationship that grew into mutual respect. And Mom was so happy when Lawrence announced his engagement to Carrie. Their wedding at the beginning of this year was the last time many of us were all together, and it was truly a wonderful simcha to share. I had the immense privilege of spending a great deal of time with Mom these past few years. While she lost physical and cognitive abilities, she maintained her essence, her wit, her sense of humor, and omnipresent desire to be master of her own universe. It is important to say here that all of us are incredibly grateful for the caregivers that joined our family, as Mom required additional care. Together with Dad, our caregivers bestowed the most gracious love and attention upon her, and we want them to hear again how appreciative we are for all they've done for us. Mom knew from the day she met Dad that he was the one. She loved and adored and respected him. They had tons of fun together. They shared 66 years of grand adventures, sickness and health, for better or for worse, and really showed us all what a good marriage and a good life is. Mom, you done good. You lived. You really lived.
Thank you, Janice. And now we'll have Gary come forward.
That was beautiful, Janice and Jeff. We're lucky. We had a great mom who made a positive impact on so many. Thank you to all of you who have expressed their condolences and shared some lovely, touching, and funny stories about mom in the last couple of days. We were raised in a loving home by a strong, intelligent, powerful, generous, and adventurous woman. Mom ran the household like an admiral on a Navy ship. Things were done right or they were done over. She lived an exemplary life and taught us valuable life lessons along the way. She perpetuated our Jewish heritage by making a traditional conservative Jewish home, being actively involved in our temple, observing holidays, ensuring our attendance in Jewish education through Hebrew high school, and sending us to Jewish summer camp. We observed Shabbat and festive meals for the holidays. I remember noticing how special she made the holidays, sending a beautiful table with flowers, fancy china, silver, and crystal. And more importantly, I remember the way mom seamlessly made room for another seat or two at the table when dad brought home guests from temple to join us, very often without any advance warning. They didn't just talk about opening their home. They showed us by example. Mom was a gracious host and we met lots of interesting people. Mom showed generosity by opening our home to an exchange student from South Africa, an Israeli swimmer training for the Olympics, grandparents visiting for the winter or living with us in their later years, cousins visiting from out of town, youth group kids from other temples, or our friends just coming for an overnight. Our house was always open and mom made everyone feel welcome. Our home was blessed with many lifelong family friends like Lenny and Hilda, Florence and Lou, Ben and Ida, Libby, Alice, Giovanna, Rosalie and Andy, Sid and Arlene, the Gollisons, and many, many, many more. Friends just stopped by and were welcome. Some of my favorite memories were listening to the laughter from my mom and dad sitting around the table with their friends, sharing ice cream and stories. Although I've told my kids many stories about grandma and life, many stories about grandma and life in that wonderful home she created with dad, I'm sad you didn't know her in her prime. But I'm grateful you got a glimpse of what she was like on our many vacations with grandma and grandpa. I'm especially grateful you were at Catalina for us for mom's 80th birthday, when she and grandpa jetted around on the wave runner until they fell in the water and y'all jumped in and paddled mom to shore on the surfboard. That day, you got a good glimpse of what life was really like with mom. She loved adventure, not heights and not windy roads, but she loved boating and she loved to travel. One of my favorite childhood memories was our 1972 trip to Europe with mom and dad, 3 grandparents, and the 4 of us kids. In case I went too fast, that's 9 of us in a manual transmission Volkswagen van for 6 weeks. Remember, this was 1972. We had no GPS, no Google Maps, no Expedia, no TripAdvisor, but we had mom, the original Google. She was a voracious reader and I think probably the smartest person I ever knew. She had an idea of where she wanted to go and what she wanted to see, and she made it happen. We had a fabulous adventure, and that kind of sums it up. Mom created a home with a solid bedrock foundation based on tradition, education, and discipline, mixed in with layers of love, generosity, kindness, creativity, warmth, and wisdom, and the rest was an adventure, and she nailed it. Rest peacefully, Mom. I'll love you forever. Oh, and one more thing. She was right. It's not a good idea to play ball in the house.
Thank you, Gary. Ron, would you like to come forward?
The challenge was always to make Mom laugh. If we could do that, we won. And because she had one of those infectious laughs that would perpetuate the laughter and keep everyone rolling, that little stunt was probably invented by Gary at one of our Passover Seders. And that was one of the things that would really get Mom rolling, and to the point where water or whatever else she was drinking might come out her nose. And if we got to that point, you know what? We scored. We scored. Actors on stage loved hearing her in the audience because her reaction could dictate how the rest of the audience would respond to the show. It wasn't always easy reaching that laughter threshold. Though, you know, she was pretty strict and she did not mince words when it came to laying down the rules. For instance, in preparation for guests coming over to the house, she would sit the 4 kids down on the bench in the entry hall, and she'd pace back and forth. And she'd stand in front of us and say, "Kids, we have company coming. While the company is here, I don't want anybody to fart or burp or say shit and fuck. Is that understood?" This is true. She always seemed to make eye contact with Gary during that part, but she was talking to all of us. Of course, there were other rules. Don't play ball in the house, and don't bleed on the carpet. I find myself telling my children some of these on a daily basis. As already mentioned, because Mom loved to entertain, we heard those rules time and time again. As with most things in life, there has to be a balance. And when things don't go quite as planned, flexibility is really important. I recall one year at Passover, Mom was preparing to have a large family Seder, about 15 of us, which was really par for the course. She had already done all of the grocery shopping, so our 2 refrigerators were completely packed to the gills in preparation. Hard-boiled eggs are needed for the Seder, so Mom asked our housekeeper to prepare 80 huevos for the meal. And with wide eyes, Amelia questioningly clarified, "80 huevos, Mrs.?" And Mom said, "Sí, 80 huevos." So Mom was a little bit surprised when 80 instead of 18 of the intended eggs were prepared. We all got a really good laugh out of it, and ate egg salad for the next 3 weeks. Going with the flow and making adjustments really became a central theme as her Parkinson's progressed. This very proud and independent woman had to come to terms with the notion that there were things that she could no longer do on her own. But that did not stop her drive to continue to live life to the fullest. Dad reminds me that she continued to do things like volunteering to help stuff envelopes for a friend who was running for political office. But since her hands weren't working all that well at the time, she was very good at ordering Dad what exactly to do. The same is true for many of those knotted tied blankets that Mom made for many of us. Dad followed orders very well and followed her instruction. Instructions were very welcome while acting as Dad's navigator, both literally and figuratively.
She always had the map and provided turn-by-turn directions while Dad would drive. Dad told me yesterday that there are still places in Los Angeles that he has no clue how to get to because he always relied on her guidance. And even now, with GPS readily available, we're all going to be a little lost without her. One of Mom's favorite things was what we call the magic hour at Catalina Island. That's when the sun is setting and the wind is dying down. The remaining daylight creates a breathtaking shimmer on the water, and we gently rock on the back deck of the boat, starting to see the lights of Avalon and mainland start to flicker. I'm going to choose to remember Mom in that setting, surrounded by her family, holding a fishing rod and gabbing away with her best friends.
So Ron, I'd like to know how long you had that egg in your mouth before you came forward.
Just a few seconds.
I have to say, I remember so clearly at Bennett's bar mitzvah celebration when the DJ began to play YMCA, and immediately she got up with her walker and began to dance fiercely. Now that was amazing enough, but what happened next was really beautiful. Everyone in the family, and you all remember, everyone in the family gathered around her and joined in the fun. Heck, even my family became honorary Cohens and joined with her on the dance floor. Watching that moment, it was clear the love that she shares with you all. Her legacy is all of you. Her beloved of 66 years, Melvin, her children, Jeff, Janice, Gary, Ron, and their spouses, Jo Beth, Ken, Amy, and Heather. Her grandchildren, Kara, Haley, Lawrence and his wife, Carrie, Daniel, Kayla, Bennett, Charlie, Natalie, Jack, her step-grandkids, Sarah, and her husband, Justin, and their kids, Nina and Ryan, her step-grandson, Andrew, and his children, Hudson and James. We see her heart in all of you and know that her love will continue through you as you walk forward. And you keep her memory alive by incorporating the blessings of her life into your lives. Maybe you be sure to enjoy life just a little bit more and spend more time with friends because she lived that way. Maybe you laugh a little louder at a show because, as we heard, she was the best audience member ever. Maybe you become a fantastic listener and be there for those in your circle because that is what she would do. Maybe you find a new love of flowers because she loved her garden so. Maybe you find a little more order in your life and clean off that desk and set specific rules as what not to allow when guests are over. Thank you for telling that story and not making me. Remembering that is what she would do. Maybe you make sure that your clothes are all folded in your drawer, Gary, and be sure not to bleed in the house because she would demand that. Maybe you eat ice cream directly out of the carton. Maybe your home becomes the central hub for the community and you take more pleasure in the friends your kids bring to your house. Maybe you embrace those who choose to become part of your family through relationships with your children or grandchildren because she took great pride in this. Maybe you become a little more creative and take up needlepoint and sewing, even creating clothing for your family to wear. Maybe make your mind up to take that family trip that you've been dreaming of because she loved doing that, especially with her family. Maybe spend a little more time on the water or in Catalina knowing it was something she loved so much. I certainly know that you will all continue the tradition of playing YMCA multiple times at every family event, and she will be on that dance floor with you. Or maybe it is as simple as truly being present for others, being there for our family and friends in every way we possibly can, remembering that to truly connect with others is the best way that we can impact our world in a positive way. If we do any of these things, then not only is her memory a blessing, but we are bringing blessings to her memory, and we are, and together we say, Amen. There are two prayers that are left for us. And actually, what we're about to do is really the hard work of what we're here to do today. The first prayer that I'm going to chant is called El Malei Rachamim, and it really asks that we surround her soul with a womb-like compassion, and that we allow her soul to truly be at rest. If you are able, I'm going to ask you please to rise. El Malei Rachamim Shochen Bamromim Hametzeh Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei HaShekhinah Im kedoshim utehorim kezohar harakia mazirim het nishmat sura fega shehalecha leolama Mal harachamim יסתיריה בסתר כנפיו לעולמים ויצרור ביצרור החיים את נשמתה אדוני הוא נחלתה ותנוח בשלום על משכבה ונאמר Compassionate God, eternal spirit of the universe, grant a perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Tsura Fega, to Barbara, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in your eternal presence, in the shadow of your wings, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in every peaceful place. And together we say, Amen. Please be seated. We are going to take a moment now, and before we say the words of the Kaddish, and we'll talk about that in just a moment, we are going to witness the lowering of the casket into the grave. And I'm going to ask us, as we witness this, just to be as silent as we can, so that we can truly be present and feel the emotion of this moment. We'll lower the casket. The next prayer that we are obligated to say is one that's really challenging, and that is the recitation of the mourner's Kaddish. And even though in Judaism, the mourner's Kaddish is a prayer that we associate with death and with grieving, if you look at the translation of these words, and by the way, we're going to be on page 22 and 23. If you look at the translation, it never mentions death, dying, pain, or grief. In fact, it is all about praising God for life. And just like Janice said a little bit earlier, you're really not gathered here because she died. You are really gathered here because her life had such meaning and continues to hold meaning for each of you as you walk forward. And so even though right now, as we say this very first Kaddish prayer on her behalf, we are feeling the sting of the loss with great love and great respect and great care, we will take a moment and thank God for her life. If you are able, I'm going to ask you one more time, please, to stand. Again, we're on page 22 and 23. And we're going to read these words together. Yit gadal v'yit kadash shemei rabbah. Ve'alma divrach hirutei ve'amlich malchutei. Bechayechon uvyomechon uvechaye dechol beit Yisrael. Ba'agala uvizman kari v'imru. Amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevorach leolam ulamei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal shmei dekudisha b'richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shamaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, huya aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Now I know that this pandemic, one of the hardest parts is that we have not been able to wrap our arms around each other, and especially at a time of great pain, the one thing we want to do is to be able to embrace each other. But I'd like to invite you, if you are with people that you are comfortable putting your arms around, I'd like for you to take that moment and wrap your arms around your loved ones as we'll sing this last line from this prayer, a prayer for peace. We're praying for peace for all of you. We are praying for peace for our world. And I think most importantly right now, we are praying that her soul may rest in every peaceful place. And so we'll sing together. Oh, say shalom. Oh, say shalom. Oh, say shalom bimroma. Oh, say shalom. Oh, say shalom. Oh, say shalom bimroma. Huya ase shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Huya ase shalom. Huya ase shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ve'imero amen. Oh, say shalom. Oh, say shalom. Oh, say shalom bimroma. Ve'imru. Amen. You can go ahead and be seated. So we are doing now the most difficult mitzvah that we can do. It is also one of the most important mitzvot, one of the most important commandments that we can observe, and that is observing the commandment of burying our loved ones. And you guys are all here doing this mitzvah knowing that she cannot do anything to reciprocate this act of love that you are giving to her, and that makes it even more powerful. And so we are going to acknowledge that, and we are going to do our part of filling in the grave. Now, in Hebrew, the word for blood is dam, the word for human being is Adam, and the word for earth is Adamah. And you can hear how those words are connected to each other, and this is one of the reasons why we bury our dead. When you place earth into the grave, I'm going to ask that you do it at least 3 times. So why the number 3? Well, if you do something once, it could be a mistake. If you do it twice, it can be a coincidence. But if you do something 3 times, there is great intention behind that act. And even though this is not an act that we want to be doing, it is something that you are doing with your hearts wide open with great intention. Now, I know that we're also concerned with the pandemic. So there's a couple of options. I know that there are gloves on this table here. I believe there's also sanitizer in the little basket underneath the table. But actually, a lot of people are, instead of using shovels, actually picking up the dirt with their hands and putting it into the grave. It gives you that sense of really interacting with the earth. If you are going to use the shovel, I'm going to ask that for at least the first shovelful, instead of putting the blade up this way, that you turn it over so it's upside down. And the reason we do that is normally when you break ground on a building project, it is something that is exciting. Well, there is nothing exciting about what we are doing here. In fact, this feels backwards. And so to signify that, we're going to turn over the shovel. The other thing that I'd like to ask you to do is when you are finished using the shovel, rather than hand it to the person next to you, if you can place it back into the mound of earth so that your energy can leave the shovel before the next mourner picks up that shovel, that would be great. We are going to open this up for first for her husband and children to come forward, and then it's open for all of you to participate. If you are not comfortable participating, you do not have to, it's okay. And this will signify the end of our funeral service today. I hope that all of us can move forward from this place to a stronger place as we go forward. I certainly know that her memory will always be a cherished blessing for you all. So we'll invite you to come forward now. Please be very careful with the wind, and also we're on uneven ground, and just be careful around the hole.